Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Hump Day edition of the Southside Beat here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. My name is Chris Halicke, joined by Greg Macafee and Steelers Country. Let's ride. Also, Wilson, the QB1, as we all expected. Well, I won't say all, as a lot of people expected. Anybody who covers the team on a daily basis expected it. There are a lot of Twitter experts that did not think so. Some national reporters, even that I think very highly of, still thought it was a legitimate competition. This wasn't. Was it any shock to you that Russell Wilson was named the starting quarterback today?
No, and it shouldn't be. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of this conversation probably comes from Russell Wilson suffering that calf injury at the beginning of training camp, the very beginning of training camp, pushing a weighted sled, and that created everything. I don't think this was ever a quarterback competition. Obviously, Justin Fields, got the opportunity to show what he can do in this offense and everything like that. And he's still going to be used in this offense. I mean, you're going to see special packages for him and everything like that. Mike Tomlin didn't go into too many details today, or, he said, I'll let you guys speculate, which is somewhat of our job, but
the word he used was weaponized.
Weaponized.
I liked the word weaponized. So Justin Fields will be weaponized in this offense somehow, some way. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, but Justin Fields will be used in some way, shape, or form. But Russell Wilson was the starter. He was in pole position, and he just crossed the finish line today. So yeah, it shouldn't come as any surprise.
The way I as I was writing, and I right now the story is at the top of the site at DKPittsburghSports.com. I wrote a column on this, and I just wanted to be really blunt that this was never, like it or not, this was never really a competition. And one of the, not to give away the whole column because I'm not going to do that. I urge you to go read it. But one of the best ways that I could kind of that it was coming to my mind, and I didn't really write it exactly this way, but I kind of wanted to explain it a little bit, was just imagine everything that happened. In terms of the injury happening in training camp, not getting a lot of reps, really didn't get meaningful reps in training camp until the very end. Preseason action was especially, didn't play at all in the first preseason game. Second preseason game was 5 series, so a good amount of time. Just did not look great. Now, granted, a bit limited, still not 100% healthy at that point, whatever it was, but still didn't look great. And then played only 1 series, scored a touchdown, and then Mike Tomlin was like, "That's it. You're out. I saw everything I needed to see." All of that right there, that is indicative of starting quarterback treatment. That's just what that is. Yeah. That is the equivalent of the type of treatment that Ben Roethlisberger would get whenever he had established himself as a starting quarterback and was the franchise guy. Now, granted, he established himself as a starter, as pretty much as soon as Tommy Maddox's arm got injured. But either way, that was the similar type of treatment that Ben got because, it was just a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. I don't think even if Russ didn't get hurt on that first day on that during the conditioning test, I don't really think we would have seen too many different things. Obviously he would have got more reps throughout training camp and things like that, but I don't think he would have played in the first preseason game. He might have played a series at most, maybe. He probably would have played a little bit more in the second preseason game, and the last preseason game he might not have played at all. He might have played a series and then pulled him. But I don't think this would have played differently if he was healthy throughout training camp either way. But this was a foregone conclusion. Russ was going to be the starter no matter what, I'm pretty sure, unless he was hurt or did something really, really dumb.
Yeah, I remember asking Tomlin at some point during training camp, I think it was ahead of the first preseason game, if he had any concerns at all about Russ getting limited reps and of his comfort level of comfort with Russ getting, not getting enough reps at the first game. And he was just like, he dismissed it real quickly. He's just like, no, I'm not concerned at all. There was never concern. There was never talk, and Tomlin talked about, how it was a difficult decision and so on and so forth. But man, every time he talked about Russ, there was never anything that really led to, okay, well, these reps really matter. And, if you look at any other competitions that were actually going on throughout camp, which, there were only a few that were, that you could really classify, like the slot corner spot. And, I would even put tackle, with the Dan Moore and Broderick Jones and Troy Faltano, those three, vying for two spots. There was always emphasis anytime Tomlin would talk about it, emphasis on reps or emphasis on work. And anytime that there's a player not available to practice, he's like, I don't focus on players that are not practicing. I focus on the guys who are available. Just that kind of talk never was directed at Russ. He was treated differently. Now, whether you like that or you don't like that, it just seemed like it didn't matter what happened, that Tomlin was set that he's going to start Russ week 1. I don't think that necessarily gives him a full autonomy to be like, okay, you can suck and we can lose, and I'm just going to ride with you. But at the same time, Russ being the starter at the beginning of the season to me was never something that was ever in doubt.
Yeah, it was. I don't think it was ever a competition. I mean,
yeah. I would agree with that. And Rochelle brings us up here. After last year's quarterback competition, we already know. Then Coach T busts out the pole position thing, all the same, none whatsoever. And see, that's the thing is that you don't have to pay much attention. And if anything, you can go back, not just last year, but even to the year before. So really the last 3 training camps, we have had a quarterback competition in Pittsburgh. But all 3 times, it was never a quarterback competition. To me, last year was the biggest farce of them all.
Yeah.
Because Kenny Pickett was the guy. There was never a doubt in my mind that Mitch Trubisky or Mason Rudolph coming out of training camp or coming out of the preseason, especially with how Kenny looked in preseason, that there was ever going to be anybody else other than Kenny under center in week 1. But even the year before that, there was talk about, Mason Rudolph possibly making a run or Kenny Pickett coming in as the rookie and getting a spot right away. It was always going to be Mitch Trubisky. It always was. And that didn't change throughout the course of camp, throughout the course of the preseason. And it was the same thing this way. And this time we actually had one guy who was injured for several weeks throughout the competition, didn't really get much of a chance to show much, and still won the job handedly. Like, it was never a competition. I don't understand these people that are going on Twitter saying like, oh, you guys just have to listen to Mike Tomlin. No, if you really knew how to cover Mike Tomlin, you would know that this was never a competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase competition can be used as somewhat in coach speak, from a coach's perspective, as somewhat of a motivating factor for players to play better.
Yeah.
It kind of lights a fire underneath them a little bit. I mean, if we were to come into training camp and Mike Tomlin was to go up to Justin Fields and say, hey man, no matter what you do over the next couple weeks, you will not be the starter come September 8th in Atlanta. Maybe Justin Fields isn't as motivated enough to, perform to the level he's been performing over the last couple weeks. So, I mean, from obviously, the national media takes it, runs with it, blah, all that type of stuff. But I think to a point from, Mike Tomlin saying it was a quarterback competition, I think it might be a way to just motivate Justin Fields to, try to do whatever he can to try and take the position. But, that's just observation.
Yeah. Other news from the South Side today. So we hit the quarterback stuff. There was some pretty big news from the South Side today. Report by ESPN's Adam Schefter that Isaac Seumalo injured his pectoral. I don't know which one, but he sustained a pec injury. And the initial report was that they needed to get testing. And anytime you hear pec injury with an offensive lineman, that is scary. That typically doesn't end well. And then fortunately for the Steelers, came out with a report not too much longer afterward, and reported that the injury doesn't appear to be season ending, and that according to a Steelers source, that the team dodged a bullet, to use quotes. And so either way, I mean, a pec injury, offensive lineman, he's going to miss time. Obviously, it not being a season ending injury is dodging a bullet for sure, but it's still a massive loss up front. What are your initial reactions to Sayamalo getting injured?
I mean, it's just it kind of piles on to everything else that's been happening to the offensive line throughout training camp. I mean, this is one of the guys on the offensive line that was a vet. I mean, obviously you have James Daniels and everything like that, but Isaac Seumalo, I mean, he's been a guy that's been around. It seemed throughout training camp that he was one of those guys that was, I don't know if protected is the best word, but he was taking those vet days along with guys like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and everything like that. Like you can tell they were kind of taking it easy on him, knowing how important he was going to be for this offensive line. And depending who takes the spot, I mean, I would expect right away that probably Spencer Anderson will probably slide into there. But it takes away the experience from this offensive line that, still needs to come together.
Yes. Now, granted, I have spoken with a few of the offensive linemen throughout the past few days. These guys are pretty confident in their ability and how they're building their chemistry together. But at the same time, these injuries really, really suck, and it's for an offensive line that does need to build chemistry. That this is gonna be a big monkey wrench in that, because they do need experience up front. They already have Zach Frazier starting at center. You're going to have either Broderick Jones. I would assume Broderick Jones. I'm sorry, I have seen nothing to convince me that Troy Fautanu is going to be ready for week 1. We saw today that he was at least back to doing some warm-up type exercises and stuff like that. But I have yet to see anything, along with the fact that, I reported in Friday Insider a couple weeks ago that, like, hey, I was told 4 to 6 weeks for Fautanu. And if you do 4 to 6 week window, the 4 weeks is right up to week 1. Now you're talking about, if he's able to practice next week, then maybe that opens the door. Maybe he does get right back into the early stages of that window. I don't know how confident I am in that, but
do you think this injury somewhat forces their hand at all? I guess what would your
they're not going to rush Fautanu back. Yeah. They're not going to rush him back because what you can do still is, I mean, you can run out of 5. And so this is a question here. Vibing with the Dogs asks who takes the left guard reps now, Anderson or McCormick. Every time since the start of training camp throughout, I mean, up until today, anytime Sayamalo has not been in there with the first team, it has been Spencer Anderson. That has been consistent throughout practice and consistent in the preseason. So I would assume that continues, that Spencer Anderson will be the left guard in place of Sayamalo. Now, that would give you a starting 5 right now from left to right: Dan Moore, Spencer Anderson, Zach Frazier, James Daniels, and Broderick Jones. That without Sayamalo in there it leaves a lot of questions and even a bit to be desired. But right now with that, I mean, you've got James Daniels and Dan Moore as your 2 most experienced guys. Now, James Daniels is a pretty good guard. Dan Moore still has some questions to answer for sure. But yeah, a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience. I mean, you're talking about Zach Frazier, you're talking about Spencer Anderson. Between the 2 of those guys, pretty much no experience in terms of regular season action. And then Broderick Jones, who has less than a season of starting under his belt. So this is it was some pretty bad news for the offensive line. And I do think that this is going to be something that could really hurt this team early on. I do think that maybe now I do expect there to be a move or 2 to add to this team, whether it be practice squad or what have you. But they definitely need to add one way or the other, whether that's you want to beef up the offensive line or you just say, you know what, screw it. Let's go and get Noah Brown and Brandon Ayuk both and just add a lot of firepower to the receiver room.
Noah Brown just signed with the Commanders.
Oh, well, there you go. So Noah Brown signing with the Commanders. So there goes.
So I'll shoot that one in the foot.
Yeah, shoot that one in the foot. So, and then another update when it comes to news elsewhere. 49ers GM John Lynch said he expects Holden, Brandon Ayuk to practice today. And he said he asked what happened if he doesn't. Lynch says then we'll deal with that. Now, if Brandon Ayuk does practice with the 49ers today, do not freak out if you're Pittsburgh. Only freak out if the news breaks that he signs his extension with the 49ers. That's the time to freak out. But if Brandon Ayuk does not practice with the 49ers today, that means that he is then subject to fines. The Holden only goes so far.
Yeah.
So if he does not show up for practice today, subject to fines. So, but Noah Brown is no longer an option at receiver. And Rochelle brings this up too, and I did forget about this until they brought this up. There was a practice squad addition today. Doug Nestor, offensive lineman, added, West Virginia alum. So he is now another at least option internally for the Steelers up front.
Yeah. I think Jonathan Ward and Anthony Averett were both brought back as well, I believe.
Yeah, and there are other guys we're not really at liberty to say.
Yeah,
but there were other guys that are going to be brought back. I'll just put it that way. That's the only way that I can put it. Unfortunately, I can't say more. But there will be other guys who were previously on the roster brought back. I'll be shocked if that does not happen. But either way, So when you're looking at external additions, especially at receiver, it's hilarious that I brought that up pretty much as soon as that broke.
Like I was like getting ready to say it, and then he said his name, and then
here we go. We got some more quotes coming out. At some point, you've got to play. That came from John Lynch. When it comes to talking about Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it is almost 3:00 on the West Coast right now, and I think 49ers practice is either already begun or it's beginning, and it's probably the same situation in which they can't report on what happens in practice until after practice, and so I think at some point we're going to see whether Brandon Ayuk participated or not. But I still think, Rochelle asked a question. Where's our Ryan Watts injury confirmation? Coming later in the week. I'll put it that way. Later in the week. I'm writing Friday Insider this week. Coming later in the week. That's just
tease.
Yeah. Coming later in the week. I don't know. Later in the week. I'll get to it then. But yesterday you said you had to wait for confirmation before reveal. What was that all about? Okay, so here's the thing when it comes to practices. For those who aren't familiar with the NFL policy when it comes to practices and it comes to observing practices and reporting on practices. When you're in training camp, everything's up for grabs. Everything is what you see, you can report on. You can report on it right away because practices are open to the public. So anybody can see it. So you can report on it. When practices are closed, when they're on the south side, they are closed practices. You cannot report on anything until, first off, after practice is over. And then anything that you see that is outside of the initial window in which you can take pictures or take video, anything like that. So anytime you see video coming from reporters of, for example, we have a video of Troy Fautanu like working out and stuff like that. That is in that, like we can report that because we can see it and we're allowed to record it. Anything else that you see after that, you have to get it verbally confirmed by a player or by somebody who was on that practice field in order for it to be confirmed.
Yeah.
And if you don't get that verbally confirmed by somebody, or you don't have somebody tell you something outside of that, you have to be told in order to report on it. And if you're not told, then you can see it, but you can't report it. So that's it. But yeah. So that's the answer to that question. I'm going to continue to try to keep my phone out here, just because now they're starting to be more and more. Jordan then asks, so what's the information you had to hold back on? I'm getting further confirmation. I don't have a complete answer, but I will by Friday. I know I will. So there you go. That is why I'm not going to give you, 60% of an answer. Pretty much. Rochelle says, can't see and say, I got to confirm and say, yep. Like, for example, if just to kind of give something here. If you see, for example, here's a really, really, really good one. Okay, next week, if Spencer Anderson lines up at left guard in practice, there's our answer right there. Okay, Sam Mullo's not practicing. Spencer Anderson is in at left guard. As soon as practice is over, I can't just get in our Steelers feed and go, Spencer Anderson was playing left guard with the first team today. I have to go to Spencer Anderson and say, hey, were you playing left guard today with the first team?
Yeah.
And he says, yes. It's verbally confirmed. I can report it.
Yeah. I mean, for example, like Broderick Jones yesterday, he was asked if he has taken any reps at left tackle. And he said he has done stuff before and after practice, something like that.
Yeah.
Not a lot of reps, but
yeah, you can't
I don't
just
want to feed
see something. You can't just see something and just, yeah. So it's it's not as easy as it is during training camp, and that's why whenever when we were reporting on stuff during training camp and people were ranting and raving about all the stuff that we're getting, it's like we can report on everything we see. That's why it was just entry after entry after entry after entry, because we could report on the smallest little things that we see. But
like, I mean, for example, like until today, like obviously Troy Fatanu was participating in the stretches and things of that nature today, which is during that open period that we can watch and report on after practice. But up until today, he was inside he wasn't around, so like we weren't able to report anything during those times. If that makes sense.
Yep. And William says, you can report what you hear. Of course I can. Anytime I'm told anything by a source that by a source that I trust, then yes, I'm going to report it. Vibe with the Dogs, appreciate it, says, y'all don't get these guys in trouble. Calm down. Appreciate it. Like,
thanks.
But listen, like there is something that I got verbally confirmed today about Ryan Watts that I could say. I'm just going to wait until I have a fuller answer in Friday Insider. There you go. Just easier to put it that way. I'm not going to spill the beans on a podcast. Come on. It's not, and the thing is like, it's not like this is going to be like earth shattering news. I mean, we know that it's a serious injury because the dude's out for the season.
Yeah.
Like you can at least deduce that he is out for the season. Now, the good thing is that, he sustained an injury to his head/neck area. You could see that with the replay. But the fact is that he was still able to walk off the field under his own power.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's at least the encouraging thing, the encouraging sign. But obviously something happened in that injury that is just, okay, his season's done.
Yeah.
Who knows? I could sit here and speculate. I could sit here and, Anyway, anything else that we missed from practice today? I feel like there was a few different things that happened in practice today that we can report on. But
Roman Wilson was back in one-on-one drills.
That's a good one.
So participation. He was, participating in with the wide receivers and things of that nature. Cam Hayward said there's no movement on his contract. That's another good one, I think. He said, he reiterated his desire to be a one helmet player, but it's, it's going to be up to his agent, the Steelers front office to kind of get a deal done. Obviously, there's still some negotiation going on there and everything like that. Obviously, we all know the Steelers don't, talk contracts during the season. So you would expect to get it done within the next couple days, maybe. You can probably speak further on this than me of what they've done in the past, but I don't know if negotiations will technically go into like the practice week. Cam said today that he remembers Troy's contract getting signed on the plane or something like that in previous years or in the past. But yeah, he said there's no update on his contract status.
Yeah, I as far as I know, there is nothing new on any of the contracts, and I do think that it is going to continue to be a situation in which Omar Khan is going to wait out this Brandon Ayuk situation. Mm-hmm. I really do think that in one way or the other. I think that the longer this goes, because there were options. Like, for example, Noah Brown was a pretty decent option there. There are options, and the fact that he is willing to put his internal players' contracts, like potential extensions, on hold. I think that he feels pretty good about how that situation is going to play out, but who knows? Who knows what turn that entire saga is going to take. Rick asks, in terms of injury issues, what about Jalen, or how about Jalen? Well, he said yesterday that he feels like he's going to be ready for week 1. You were over there and heard him, so I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, he said he's ready for week 1. He said in the past when we've talked to him that he feels like he recovers pretty quickly when he's been hurt in the past and everything like that. And he's like yesterday during open period, he was running laps around the field and things of that nature. So I think he'll be good to go. I mean, he seems pretty positive in his ability to be ready for week 1. So yeah, I would say I would feel pretty confident of him being able to play week 1 against Atlanta.
Yeah, he does seem, with what we're able to observe and report on, that the light activity that he's doing he's looking pretty, like, after these 4 days the players are going to have off. I would expect him. I would be shocked if he was like a full participant any day, but I would expect him to be at least a limited participant in practice next week as they prepare for the Falcons. And then if he continues on track with where he is now, I think it's a pretty solid bet. I would say better than 50-50 that Jalen Warren will be active in week 1. Anybody else other than that, Roman Wilson, Troy Fautanu, I don't feel as encouraged about, especially since both of those guys are rookies. Tomlin, it's pretty much like if you can't, especially for rookies, if you can't participate in practice, you're not playing.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm like, if Fautanu is only able to be a limited participant in 1 or 2 practices, I don't feel great about it, even if he's listed as questionable. If he's unable to practice at all, he ain't playing.
Yeah. I mean, even Roman said today, I mean, he wouldn't say if he was planning on playing. Like, he didn't say he was expecting to play or anything like that. He said he would sure hope that he's hoping to play. So I think he's not trying to get ahead of himself and say that he'll be ready. He wants to take it. He said he's taking it day by day. He's focusing on tomorrow. So we'll have to see how that kind of plays out. But for him, seeing how long he's been out, I mean, since the beginning of training camp, I wouldn't expect him to play, but I could be wrong there.
I'd be shocked.
Yeah,
which again is why I do think if you were to twist my arm into betting, I do think that there's an addition at receiver before the season begins, whether that is Brandon Ayuk or anyone else, or a trade of some other kind. I don't know, but just because, with Roman Wilson, if he doesn't play, I mean, that's 4 receivers. Now, granted, I would expect, I think there's a strong chance that Des Fitzpatrick comes back to the practice squad. I don't know as much about Quez Watkins. He seems to have a bigger market in terms of the ability for him to come back. But if Des Fitzpatrick comes back on the practice squad, like, he could be elevated for that week 1 game if Roman Wilson can't play and there's no other additions. Because if this is, for example, if the Brandon Ayuk stuff does leak into the regular season and he continues to, and this hold in turns into a holdout and he's actually not playing, like, and there is a trade eventually, like I'm saying that could be a possibility down the road if that is how that situation plays out. We'll get a pretty good inkling of that if Ayuk's at least going to practice today with the 49ers, then maybe he's not willing to forego, game checks or not be fined. Maybe he just doesn't want to lose any money, but either way, we'll see how that plays out. One final question here from Rick, and then we're going to wrap things up for today. And then tomorrow, we should be back to like a 4:00 time for both tomorrow and Friday. This is like today's practice on the south side was the last one until next Monday. And that is going to be the first practice that they are like, it's actually like regular. Like I know the regular season doesn't officially kick off until a week from tomorrow, but that is when the regular season for NFL teams really begins. That's when the preparation, the game planning, and where practice is then geared toward preparing the team to beat the Atlanta Falcons. That is whenever that practice begins. So 4 days off, and then they're going to be back Monday. So really quick question here from Rick. What plays does the Seumalo injury affect the most? It's a good question because there are a lot of things that it can impact. For example, if you look at the screen to George Pickens in that game against Detroit on that first series of the first pass that Russ threw, Seumalo was the guard that was running out to get that one guy. Now that one guy ended up getting there and barely getting George enough where George's elbow hit the ground, and so he was then ruled down. But Seumalo, like doing something like that, also being able to do reach blocks on like outside zone and being a mauler on the inside. So it really does impact just about everything. I would say that maybe Spencer Anderson is a little bit more spry out in open space. Maybe like for that screen type, like I remember the screen that they ran. I think it was in the first preseason game against the Texans, to Najee to the right side. I remember seeing Najee run down the field, and way downfield was Spencer Anderson.
Yeah.
I mean, he got downfield and like there wasn't a penalty for an eligible receiver downfield. So it's not like he got a head start and that the Steelers got away with an infraction. No, he got downfield really fast.
Yeah.
So he might be a little more spry than Seumalo, but when it comes to the different details and minutia of playing left guard, Seumalo is obviously better. And so you're going to get a step back on just about everything else. And so and Rick says Drat screen was one of my concerns. And listen, like Spencer is athletic enough to be able to get out there. But again, it's not just athletic ability. It's also knowing where to go, it's anticipating where the defender is going to be. And so Seumalo obviously has a lot more of that under his belt than Spencer Anderson does. So, yeah.
And I mean, you look at Cordell Patterson's touchdown run from the Lions.
Seumalo.
I mean, he kind of chip blocked and he got out ahead of it and sealed off a linebacker at the second level.
Yeah.
And Patterson took off.
It was a heck of a block.
Yeah. So you lose something like that too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up today. I'm just going to do one more check just to make sure that we're not missing anything on Brandon Ayuk real quick, because this is kind of the thing that we're watching. Nope. Nothing new. So if there's anything new, check our Steelers feed, because we will be looking for just about anything, and anything we can put in the feed, we will. Keep an eye on the feed, by the way, over the next couple of days. It obviously probably won't be as active since there are no practices tomorrow or Friday. But either way, we're going to continue to fill that up with information as soon as we get it, whether it comes to practice squad signings, trades that are possibly made, whatever it is, we'll put that there. And then obviously we'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, here for the Southside Beat. But until then, that's Greg Macafee. I'm Chris Halicke. We'll catch you guys on the flippity flip.
See you later, guys.